Your final video, I should say, on the hot deserts topic is going to be desertification. It's just the bottom bullet point from the spec. Strategies used to reduce that risk. In addition, I'm just going to throw in one little slide on effects as well, because it seems strange to us that causes and responses are on there, but actually the impacts of desertification are not mentioned. So we will just cover that very, very briefly as well. It's something that you can use to evidence potentially in development questions as well as desertification questions should the exam board drop a question in on it. Currently I'm learning the dance, the hokey cokey, not all of it, just the ins and outs. As previously mentioned, we're going to do a very quick slide on impacts of desertification. The concept, remember, with desertification is the spread of more desert-like conditions. It's a reduction in vegetation cover and also a reduction in vegetation for consumption by both animals and human beings as well. So your top bullet point there, one of the impacts is your crops and cattle die and you end up with a reduced harvest. The concept for a reduced harvest is the idea that if deserts are spreading into an area, you've got less area of land to cultivate, and therefore you will reduce the amount of food available to the population. It reduces the calorie intake of the population, and as a result of that, those people are less able to work. They will actually produce less in the future. They'll also be more susceptible to disease such as septicemia, through the basis that their body simply won't have enough energy to fight off infection, and as a result of that, you can have the potential for famine and even starvation and death. Now, I should just point out, I should have done this at the start of the slide, apologies for this, we will always use northern Burkina Faso here as our example. So everything I just said, just put northern Burkina Faso in front of it regarding crops and cattle dying. In terms of the crop, if you want an example, corn or millet will do absolutely fine here. The reduced harvest of that obviously is going to reduce your calorie intake. In terms of the animals, cattle's there, I'd also advise you to use from the previous slide the 3 billy goat graph. The reason for that is obviously goats can also produce milk. If you reduce the amount of milk available for consumption, you reduce the calcium intake, therefore people have weaker bones, they're more susceptible to injuries on that basis, and as a result of that, it obviously lowers those people's quality of life as they are less safe. In terms of the longer term impacts, if you've got a desert spreading, you will then in the future have the inability to plant future crops, which gives you the exact same impacts as previous. And furthermore, regarding the inability to plant future crops, if you have a reduction in vegetation cover or your ability to plant future crops on the basis there is less nutrients, it also obviously reduces the amount of food or animal feed available for animals, e.g. the goat. So you get that also the negative impact there on both arable farming, which is crop farming, and pastoral farming, which is the raising of animals. Now, the third bullet point is something to be aware of in all your exams, really. If human beings are at risk of something, they're at threat of something, as all animals actually, we don't just stand and wait for it to happen and stand there and then die. What we will do as a species is go, right, hang on a second, we need to move away from said threat. Taking, I don't know, tropical storms as an example, if you can see a tropical storm coming, you will run away from it. And the exact same example works here in terms of desertification. If you can see the desert spreading towards you in northern Burkina Faso, and over a number of years you see your crop harvest reduce, you see your animals beginning to die, you see your children being weaker on the basis they have a lower calorie intake, you will move to a place where you believe that you will be able to access both clean water and also enough food to survive. And as a result, migrants will move to cities. It's the concept of urbanization. This would be an example of push migration. You are forced to move on the basis that your quality of life or standard of living, or actually the threat of death, quality of life is lower, obviously standard of living is lower, and the threat of death is higher, so you will move to cities like Ouagadougou, which if you can spell right in the exam, I'll be so proud of you. What happens there is these farmers, obviously poor subsistence farmers, they're only growing food for themselves in these regions, that's what subsistence means, will turn up in Ouagadougou with essentially the clothes on their back, and that will be it. They will have to build their own settlements, which is known on the board there as an informal settlement. You can also call them a slum, and what that will mean is it puts further strain on the services within Ouagadougou in terms of healthcare and schooling. Take schooling example, you have larger class sizes if children can actually access school at all, and therefore less one-to-one time with the teacher, lower quality of education, lower educational outcomes. That will therefore mean less access to opportunities of a high-skilled job in the future. Furthermore, in terms of healthcare, if you've got more and more people turning up from northern Burkina Faso, these people are likely to, one, be weak from the journey, and two, actually not be in a particularly good health position when they arrive, and as a result of that, they're more likely to need medical care. That adds to the waiting times of everyone else in the city. Furthermore, slums are always built to no plan, and as a result of that, it makes it very difficult to provide services for these people, e.g. rubbish collection, sewerage, flush toilets, etc. And as a result of that, the quality of life of those people in the slums decreases, the new arrivals, if you will, but also the rest of the city as well. It will ruin people's views. They'll have less comfort living where they are. They're more likely to have a contaminated water source because people within the informal settlement will likely open defecate. That can get into the water supply. It can lead to the spread of cholera. So the concept here is that the impact of desertification is not just felt in the local northern Burkina Faso region, but also the entire country as people migrate to a capital city to try to be able to survive on the basis that their current quality of life will become so low in northern Burkina Faso, but that will have a negative impact on other residents in your capital city. Right, in terms of tackling or managing or responding to desertification, your first one there on the board is a local scale project found in northern Burkina Faso. Please actually call it magic stones, don't call it stone lines. Magic stones is a specific. Essentially, you line up stones. You can see it better probably in the right image than my paint diagram on the left. The concept here is that you line up essentially lines of stones which are around about 30 centimetres tall. With that in mind, what will happen when the heavy rains come? You get that 3-month to 4-month wet season in these areas. The heavy rain will obviously hammer the soil, and if you've already removed the vegetation in this area, it's more likely to cause splash erosion and soil erosion. However, the stone lines or magic stone lines actually act as a barrier to both the water and the soil being transported with it. As a result of that, the stone lines will trap soil, and some of the water will get through. They're not going to be exactly impermeable, I should say, but the water will be slowed. It gives the water more chance to infiltrate into your soil. If, as a result of that, there is more moisture available in the soils, it means that you have the potential to grow plants again in this area. With any nutrients trapped as well, they can be raked back by farmers across their field and then planted within. Now, this isn't going to work in the Sahara Desert itself, because obviously there isn't enough rainfall or soil to make this work. However, it will work in the Sahel region. It can trap soil and make sure that even if the people are cutting down trees, which they're going to need to do for that 3 times population increase, the soil nutrients and soil water will still be there, so more plants can be grown. It therefore means that the impact of a lower calorie intake can be managed here, because people can grow corn and millet instead. Right then, one of the positives is this is very, very, very cheap. All it needs is your farmers to do this themselves. There are ample number of stones here found in the Sahel within the soils, and as a result, it's a very cheap, effective strategy, but it can only be used on a local scale. With that in mind, it will positively impact those local people in terms of increasing their calorie intake, but also arguably increase the quality of life of people in Ouagadougou, the capital city, as less people would hopefully migrate there in the future. As soon as you start planting crops in this region, that obviously leads to a harvest, and you can repeat that the next year. It also means any freak rainfall outside of the wet season will be intercepted by those crops. Right, your second and actually final management strategy for desertification is the Great Green Wall. Now, quite simply, if you know that the cause of desertification is the removal of vegetation, it's a common sense response to plant more vegetation to avoid all those impacts that we saw earlier, leading to the negative multiplier effect. For example, a lack of interception means more splash erosion, means more soil erosion, means that in the future vegetation won't grow there, so you have a spread of deserts. If you can plant trees in that area, what we call afforestation, it simply means you don't get that impact, because actually rainfall would then be intercepted. You could also do the same for baking the soil or wind blowing the soils away. So this is a international scale project. I believe it goes through 13 countries. in the Sahel region in northern Africa. It stretches across the entire continent from east to west, 7,000 kilometres long and 15 kilometres wide wall of trees which straddle the south of the Sahara Desert. The concept here is you have greater interception and shading of soil as it shows up on the board, and therefore less soil erosion, and it means that plants can grow there in the future. It means that this could be an environmentally sustainable project. The example tree there, the acacia tree, is one of those that can grow in this region. It gives the additional benefit you can essentially rubber tap, it's actually rubber gum these, or gum tap these trees, as well as a little industry that gets created. It's also very sustainable on the basis that it doesn't actually damage the tree, so it gives people a livelihood while also protecting the deserts themselves. In this region, a secondary benefit of this is that mangoes have been growing for the first time. The fertility of the soil has increased so much in northern Burkina Faso and also Senegal. They've actually managed to plant mangoes, which obviously have a huge amount of vitamin C in them, and it means that the people are less at risk of septicemia, that infection disease, and as a result of that, they are healthier and stronger and can work more and actually put more into tackling desertification, e.g. planting more trees. One thing I should point out with the Great Green Wall is all the people who work there are volunteers. You do not have to pay them, which is a huge bonus for countries like Burkina Faso, because the government simply wouldn't have the ability to pay people to plant these trees. They do it voluntarily, generally from the local area, but also university students are known to go and do this as part of their work experience project to try and show that they are involved in national affairs, particularly people who are looking to get into a government role. So hopefully the Great Green Wall makes sense. It's probably a very, very common sense solution here. If you plant trees, you will have more interception, you'll have more shade, and the wind will blow less soil away. Hopefully all that makes sense for desertification. Come and see us down in H7 if you are not sure, but hopefully this covers everything that could come up on that topic.